from them, which is always an ominous.
All right, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's get started. Um, it is my pleasure to welcome you all here for the second keynote presentation of the day. Thank you all for coming. I would like to introduce to you Alexandra Humphreys. Here in the virtual world of Second Life, she is known as Headwind One. Alex is a presenter, a journalist, and an author from the UK. Her talk today is Playing with Reality, Gamifying Education in the COVID-19 Pandemic. She's a familiar face across the UK and brings a wealth of live broadcasting experience, most notably with the CBBC Children's News Programme Newsround, BBC News Programmes, and weather on the Welsh language channel SC4. Oh, sorry, S4C. In 2014, Alex began producing and presenting Feel, a Welsh language children's TV news program produced by BBC Wales. This led to her co-producing or co-presenting S4C's primetime entertainment series, Band Cymru, along with co-presenting and coverage of the world's biggest youth festival, the Urt Eisteddfod. Alex became one of the presenters on CBBC's News Round, a role which included interviewing countless celebrities such as the Vamps and Olimars. And since then, Alex has worked as a senior journalist reporter on BBC One's Wales Live, reported for network BBC Breakfast on BBC One, and BBC's technology program, Click. Along with her passion for classical music, presented CBC Radio Cymru's live broadcast of the Welsh Proms opening night, and has also been the roving reporter at Proms in the Park for BBC Radio Wales. Passionate about gaming, Alex has presented several radio documentaries on the subject, including for BBC Radio for What's in a Game and the BBC World Service In the Studio World of Warcraft. At the end of 2022, Alex became an author with the publication of her first nonfiction book, Playing with Reality, Gaming in a Pandemic, which explores how the gaming industry thrived and evolved over the pandemic years, along with player and expert stories. Some of those stories are people that we know right here in this audience. Hi, Gentle. Alex also hosts the live events, which has included the CBB's live stage with Dr. Raj, BAFTA Q&A sessions, and an evening with gaming developer and co-founder of Wales Interactive, David Banner. Along with her presenting work, Alex also provides bilingual voiceovers for BBC science videos for schools, news reports for various TV programs, and has filmed across the world, including in the US and Russia. She can still be seen presenting news round occasionally, but her main work is as a presenter of S4C's Weather Service and S4C's weekly half-hour news review program for Welsh learners. Alex also reads S4C's news bulletins, and with her expertise in news, gaming, and music, is often a guest pundit on TV and radio. Almost there. Perhaps most relevant to those of us in virtual worlds was Alex's visit last month on Draxter's Book Club. Her discussion of her book, Playing with Reality Gaming in a Pandemic. And that led us here. And with no further ado, I turn it over to Alex. Take it away, Alex.
Thank you, LV. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And thank you everyone for being here as well. It's great to be back in Second Life. The book club that I was at a few weeks ago was just fantastic experience. So yeah, thank you for that, and great to see you here. Just in case I miss anyone's message to me in the chat, please do get in touch with me afterwards if I haven't replied to you at all, because my eyes aren't on the chat at the moment. So apologies if I do miss something, but hopefully LV will help me catch up with the questions at the end. So as LV mentioned, I'm a journalist, a presenter at the BBC, mainly a weather presenter at the moment in Wales, but I still do journalism, and I've done a lot of gaming journalism. And some of the pictures that you'll see on the slide right here at the moment are something that LV mentioned earlier on. So a couple of the radio documentaries that I've made, World of Warcraft, in the studio, that was for the World Service, and What's in a Game, which was looking about whether it's time that games should be classed as art forms in themselves right now, and that was for BBC Radio 4. And I also write articles as well. Most recently, the one that you see on the screen there on the right, that's about Seth, about how video games help people with disabilities and help them with their mental health. I'll mention a little bit more about Seth later on. But yes, I'm a big gamer, and I have also written a book. So this was my lockdown project. I lived alone, and my family, my parents and my sisters, they all lived almost 300 miles away. So so lockdown was like it was for everybody. It was horrible, and I found myself just being absorbed into the world of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And I had a moment where I totally forgot about the outside world. I forgot about what was going on, and I felt so much better for a moment. And I realized that, you know what, other people are being helped by games in lockdown as well. So I started to write about it, and it was like therapy for me. It was a really therapeutic experience. And I'm gonna just whiz through this now, but the book essentially has three parts to it. There are studio stories about how they adapted and evolved over the pandemic and how they finished games in lockdown. The second main part of the book is player stories, including some who turned to games for the first time over lockdown and haven't looked back since. And then the third part of the book is essentially the future. So we look at the metaverse, have expert opinions on what the metaverse is, including Philip Rosedale. He's given me an interview and he tells me his thoughts on the metaverse. And we also look at what implications the pandemic and spending so much more time in screens will have on the future of virtual worlds and us as well. Some of those thoughts I will be talking about, revisiting at the end of this presentation. But the book also covers a lot of other different themes as well, and education is one of them. So that's what I'm going to be talking about here today. Just going to be giving you a few examples of some of the stories in my book that covers education, how education was gamified by some over the pandemic. Obviously, that people couldn't go to schools, working from home. So I'm going to be looking at neurodivergent children in games. That's an example from Australia. I'm going to be looking at an organisation called Girls Make Games from the US, and who teach girls about game design. And of course, I couldn't not speak about Second Life. So I'm going to be talking about a further education college in Cardiff who used Second Life, used it for the first time over lockdown. And then at the end, a few little thoughts about the future of virtual worlds. And then I will open up the floor for you to ask any questions. And I'd also love to hear your thoughts. So do get in touch with me. Right then, so let's get straight to it. The first example I'm going to be talking about in my book is neurodivergent children and games. So one of the interviews in the book is with Matthew Harrison. He's a senior lecturer at Melbourne Graduate School of Education, which is part of the University of Melbourne. Now, he teaches and he trains teachers on how to use gaming in classrooms. When the pandemic hit, he helped set up a group called Yellowcraft. Now, this was essentially a virtual online playground for autistic girls. They needed, it became apparent that they needed a safe space because there was a lot of trolling going on for, a lot of autistic people suffer from trolls. And so in response to this, and also in response to helping kids through lockdown, they set up this server. It's a whitelist server called Yellowcraft. So it was completely safe. Only people who had been authorized could use it. Now, Matt's passion is helping neurodivergent children with play and their education. And he told me that lockdown was especially hard for this group because autistic children rely on structure and routine. And these are two things that totally went out the window during lockdown. So this server became so popular. In the end, they had to cap it. They had to stop the numbers attending because they needed to keep the adults, enough adults being able to help the kids. So it was great that it was so beneficial to the girls. And what Matt found from this experience was something that he had already anticipated, but not everybody else had, that shy kids suddenly came out of their shells when it came to interacting in Minecraft, because they did use a lot of different games, but Matt was telling me that Minecraft was the most popular with children and it suited their communication styles. So neurodivergent children really, really flourished within Minecraft. Now, he told me that a lot of neurodivergent children, they don't want to make eye contact. They find it very overwhelming. So face-to-face groups, Zoom or Teams is hard for this group. But the tools within Minecraft allow for many different communication styles. So, if kids didn't want to speak, they didn't have to. They could simply use the text. And so they were finding Minecraft a lifeline over lockdown. And so were their parents as well, who didn't have to worry so much about them because they had this safe place that they knew that they were actually, they were enjoying, being with other people, like-minded people. And just to diverge slightly off Matt's story here a minute, going back to one of the first slides that I showed you, and I mentioned Seth. Seth was a 13-year-old boy who also found Minecraft a lifeline over lockdown, and he started gaming for the first time with his brothers over lockdown. And he said to me, in some things I can't always join in because I use a wheelchair, but in games I can always join in and I can run around with everyone. So that was just a quote that really stood out for me when I interviewed Seth over lockdown, and it just really sort of emphasized how important these game worlds are to people, and especially like so many people found them over lockdown. But going back to Matt, well, I recently went back to him and I asked him this week actually for an update on whether the Yellowcraft online groups have continued now that we're back to face-to-face and now kids are back in their schools. And he told me that they have expanded and they've hired 2 dedicated staff to run the groups. The feedback's been amazing and each group is sold out and they have long waiting lists, and they hold these in term time and in the holidays as well. So it's just a testament really to this thing that they set up over lockdown and how it became so popular that they're going to continue it, which is great because it means that more neurodivergent children will be helped, especially girls as well, over not just face-to-face but through virtual worlds. He said to me that he's seen more gaming groups be set up since COVID, as now more people are seeing the benefits of using gaming to help with mental health issues as well, not just with the neurodivergent children, but with everybody. We have more mental health issues now since coming out of COVID. And I spoke to the NHS's gaming disorder clinic in the UK, and the psychologist there told me that they actually saw more people being referred to them since lockdown ended, because people were saying that that's when people struggled to reintegrate into society, and that's when people were turning to games because well, not turning to games, but staying with games, because they found it so comfortable to be in this virtual environment, that all of a sudden being face to face again was quite overwhelming. So that was just an interesting little thought that I also got from some of my interviews about lockdowns ending and the benefits of gaming. So as we emerged from lockdowns, Matt's role went back to training teachers to use virtual worlds. And he said the pandemic forced teachers to be more tech savvy. He says they're now more skilled up. He says even the most tech cynical teacher has now had the experience of the good, the bad, and the ugly of teaching using tech. They've got more skills than they had 2 years ago. Everyone does. But despite this, one of my other interviews in the book, a person called Dean Garza, he is a specialist in using Minecraft in schools. He told me that he doesn't think that that we were ready for the pandemic, technologically speaking. And he said that the pandemic really showed how unprepared we were. And he says that unfortunately he doesn't think that if we were going to go into a pandemic again, that we still wouldn't be ready. We haven't learned enough lessons from what happened. So there are some definite different views here, but Matt says that the pandemic taught schools the value of providing different ways for students to interact. And there's teachers who work with Matt have reported that through offering virtual worlds, they have noticed some autistic students being more enthusiastic about unstructured play during lunchtimes and in the morning break. So games have helped these kids reintegrate into society. It brings to mind something else that I cover in the book, the Proteus effect. Now, over the pandemic, a scientific paper was published in the journal Computers in Human Behaviour, and it's about how the Proteus effect was helping people feel more resilient to COVID. And I'm just going to quote from the book now. Players who used social virtual worlds felt less worried about catching COVID in the real world, essentially because their avatar was living in a world where COVID couldn't penetrate. And that idea is based on a phenomenon called the Proteus effect. So I'm not going to go into that too much now. I do talk about it more in the book, but it just highlights how game worlds are helping us in our real world, so joining our realities, and more people realizing this since COVID. And briefly mention about Gentle Heron and Shyla, the super gecko as well. They're a couple of people I interview in the book that I can't really go into the story at the moment. I just don't have enough time, but they're definitely worth reading those stories. You probably know about them anyway, but it was an eye-opener for me because Gentle and Shyla they highlighted to me that there are lots of people who had already experienced the loss of freedom over COVID, but they have proved that we can still do things despite this. And virtual worlds are just so perfect in helping us realize our potential. Now then, I'm just going to move on to the next example. Oh yeah, sorry, I've just skipped a slide there, but I think I have gone through all those points. Matt basically said connecting the online groups with the physical world has been really beneficial since lockdown ended, in that the kids now feel a little bit more happy about playing with each other face to face, which I briefly mentioned earlier. Now then, so my next example, I'm going to whiz through these because I think we are getting on for time. So Girls Make Games is an organization in the US. It's a scheme that gives girls experiences in learning game design. Now, Layla Shabir is the founder. Pre-pandemic, they held summer schools in the US for girls aged 8 to 18, but they had to move online, obviously. And they had to change their software to cater for the fact that kids would be remote and they wouldn't be using the organization's powerful consoles. But she told me that most school students, especially in the US, use Chromebooks, and that's true here in the UK as well. A lot of them do. So they made it work on that. So they changed their software so that kids could learn how to make games on their Chromebooks through a browser. And essentially, by the end of the summer camp, the online summer camp, each girl would have made a real browser game that people can still play online, actually. They also created online safe spaces which try to recreate the magic of summer camp, but online. Now, in the end, the online summer camps were so successful that a hybrid model is what Girls Make Games are going to be going with moving forward. Now, the feedback that they had from these online camps was that they were just so good. One person said, Girls Make Games should teach schools how to run classes on Zoom. And Layla's response to that was, well, it's video games that make our lives, our work, so much more easier. And but one thing that really stood out from this is, well, it's just another example of how realities merged over lockdown. The pandemic helped Girls Make Games go global, so they expanded their summer schools to more countries because they could do this now that they were online. They weren't restricted to just the US. So they were connecting girls from widely different communities. And it has allowed more kids to take part because holding online groups are cheaper, making it more accessible to girls from more diverse backgrounds. So these realities emerging, Girls Make Games, were able to bridge people's realities through games. Girls not only learned about game design, but from the interactive online community space, thanks to the pandemic, girls got to learn what it was like to be a game designer in a different country, and also what it was like to be a kid in a different country, and to talk to each other about how they were coping with the pandemic, which many of them did do. And Layla told me that several of the games made by the girls reflected the pandemic in some way, which I found just really interesting. And what I learned from this is that Layla talks about uncertainty. She said early on in the interview, she says, we didn't know how kids were going to be online, how it was going to work fully online. Now, this is a theme that comes through in a lot of my interviews in the book. There was a lot of uncertainty and panic from everybody. People just weren't prepared, and it just highlights Dean Garza, the specialist about Minecraft in schools that I mentioned earlier. It just highlights that, not people weren't prepared for this pandemic, technologically speaking. So we have had a lot of hard lessons from this, technologically speaking. Now then, I'm going to move on to my next and final example. This is a further education college in Cardiff. It's a story about a lecturer, Itzel, who started using virtual worlds for the first time over lockdown. Now, Itzel had never used them before, but her colleague, Gaio, he recreated the Cardiff and Vale International College campus within Second Life so that she could finish a teacher training project that she was doing, and hold an induction for a group of Chinese students who were supposed to come over to Cardiff for a year of learning in 2020, but of course COVID stopped that. It meant they couldn't come over. So what her and Gaio did was allow them to have an induction to the campus in Second Life. And what's interesting, you guys here know this anyway, the benefits of Second Life is that you could just make it something completely different, or something completely similar to the real world campus. So the actual campus looked the same, but as you can see from the slide there's a big massive Welsh dragon sitting in front of the campus. And that's the beauty of Second Life, is they could embellish it, and they gave students not just a flavour of what the campus looks like, but a flavour of Wales. So there's a castle next to the campus, and there isn't in real life in Cardiff. There is a castle, but it's not next to the campus. But they've built one in Second Life, and within it there's a classroom. So it's just a fantastic place. And you can see there's a seating area in a meadow where they have whole presentations. So after they held the induction for the Chinese students, they realized that actually they could hold more classes within Second Life. So Itzel started learning how to do this, and then more teachers started using Second Life to teach their students as well. And I go into this in more depth in the book. I haven't got time to talk about it exactly at the moment, but basically, they have an underwater laboratory where you can click on a microscope, and you can sit on a mitochondrion and while you're learning. It's just absolutely fantastic. But one of the things that Itzel's students did was to take the Chinese students on a tour around the London dungeons. And because obviously they're still in China at the moment. They weren't able to come to Cardiff, but they had an induction in the campus. They started their lessons and they went on a tour of the London Dungeons. And I'm just going to read this quote to you. This is what one of the Chinese students said. It was like a real guided tour, seeing people walk about and passing each other just like in real life. The sound effects were really cool too, and the ghosts coming and going were nice touches to make the experience more realistic. And that really made me laugh, to make it more realistic. Well, I think if I'd have seen a ghost in real life at the London Dungeons, I would have freaked out. But I get what they were saying, like, you know, you could, virtual worlds allow us to give people something extra that you wouldn't get on a tour in the physical world. So it was just fantastic. And ITSEL's project, it was just so successful that they've expanded it now and they're still using it. And what's interesting is that ITSEL had never even used virtual worlds before. And she said to me, I'd associated it with gaming and I wasn't interested in gaming. But she really embraced the experience. But I think that point there about her associating it with gaming is a really important point. I'll come back to that near the end. She says, I don't think it would have been until the metaverse came into existence that I would look at virtual worlds if it wasn't for COVID. So she says, I think the pandemic just accelerated things, and I think people were definitely more open to learning new things. And that's a sentiment shared by Philip Rosedale as well. He told me that he believed that over COVID, women especially were more open to trying new things and trying virtual worlds. So hopefully we'll see, you know, in the coming years, we'll see the benefits of that. Perhaps we will see more women in the industry, because, you know, it's 50-50 split pretty much as to how many girls and boys play games, girls and guys play games. But with regards to how many people actually work in the industry, well, there aren't many women at all. So perhaps COVID might have changed that for, you know, in a few years' time, we might see things changing. So now then, that is the final of my examples, and I'm just going to oh, actually, sorry, just before I do move on to my next slide, I did get back in touch with ITSEL's team this week just to check in and see how they're doing with Second Life. And they told me that they're now encouraging a blended approach. So the virtual campus is still there, and it allows learners to experience scenarios that they wouldn't usually have access to. It's currently being used for specialist subject areas rather than by all. They tell me that they don't see Second Life ever being used by the college as a whole because of the range of programs and applications available within a higher quality interface than Second Life. So that's where they're at the moment. But they did go on to say that, however, Second Life allows them to engage students in exciting ways and push the boundaries with the learning that's taking place there. So it's still great to see that it is still being used, and that, you know, face-to-face hasn't just wiped all that new learning. So as I come to the end of my presentation, I've shared some examples of how educational groups have used virtual worlds over the pandemic. They all learned something new that would benefit their teaching and benefit their students. All used, all merged realities in different ways, thanks to game worlds, and also thanks to the pandemic as well. A lot of these things wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for people having to do them, having to try new things. Now, as we look to the future and we're coming out of the pandemic, where do we go from here? Well, I just want to share 3 interesting thoughts from people I interviewed in the book. So this is Professor Patrick Stokes. He's Professor of Philosophy at Deakin University. And he says to me, so much of our presence in the life of other people became electronically mediated over the pandemic. We just got more used to that and more embodied to that, such that we see less distinction, not no distinction, but less distinction between forms of communication. I think the pandemic didn't start that, but it probably did accelerate it quite greatly. So that's his thoughts on how, you know, the implications of using screens so much more and where it takes us going forward. Pippin FTS is a YouTuber. He's a really popular YouTuber who uses Minecraft, and he encouraged people to build the world in Minecraft at the start of lockdown. So that's a project that he's been working on ever since, trying to recreate the world and the buildings in the world within Minecraft. And he says to me, we're reaching a point now where we can achieve this synonymous effect between the real world and technology, where it's almost indistinguishable. The fact that we're able to create that reality where we can have options as to what reality we're going to live in, it's amazing. But who knows if it's for good or for evil? So that's an interesting thought as well. I just loved that idea. It's a sentiment that's shared by Philip Rosedale and Jeremy Della Rosa, who is a former senior producer at Blizzard Entertainment. He also said something similar to me in my book and said that now it's up to us as to whether or not this knowledge, the knowledge of the metaverse and what it ends up as, is going to be a good thing or a bad thing. And we need to make sure that it is a good thing and that we are using technology for good purposes. So that's another interesting thought about how we've turned to screens much more over lockdown and where it could take us. And the final thought from one of my interviewees, Draxter, I'm sure a lot of you know about Draxter. He was great to interview, really, really great. And there's a lot of him in my book. And his thoughts on, what do we take out of lockdown? What do we take out of the fact we've had to live in screens so much more over lockdown? Well, he says, we who can engage in these worlds are very, very privileged, and we need to reflect on that so much more. There are millions, if not billions, of people on this planet that cannot connect to anyone further away than the block they live on because they have no mobility, physical or digital. So we need to figure out a way to bring equity in terms of access to the world. So yeah, I mean that just echoes something that I heard a lot of people saying as well. Like, not everybody has access to the internet, so even school lessons weren't able to be used by everybody. So in conclusion, I just want to say that, well, what I found from interviewing all the people that I did in my book, that virtual worlds, of course, they were already around us. It just took a pandemic for more people to see them. Like Itzel, for example, she didn't even ever consider that it was a thing that could be used for teaching. Second Life, that is. And the benefits of these virtual worlds that more people learnt about over the pandemic, well, the laws of physics don't exist here. We can build things in different ways. We can embellish places. We can have a laboratory underwater and still be able to use it and learn things. We can learn things if we make them into like a point and click adventure, which is essentially what Cardiff and Vale College International have done with their laboratory in Second Life. It's more, they've gamified learning. They've made it into a game. And of course, learning and playing online in virtual worlds is more inclusive for all abilities and personalities. Going back to the neurodivergent children that Matt has been helping, and Seth, a 13-year-old who now says that he can run around more and play more, getting involved with his friends in Minecraft, which he just can't do in the physical world. And there are new learning curves as well. So it's not just the people who are being taught who are learning new information, new knowledge, but the teachers are also learning new things. They're learning new skills about virtual worlds and the benefits of using this in the future of education. And I am, after having had an interview and with the Second Life team at Cardiff and Vale College International, I'm completely convinced now that this is the future of education, that it is going to be hybrid learning with virtual worlds, because there's just so many benefits. However, despite the benefits, there are still problems, there are still issues and roadblocks. There's a lot of resistance to change still. And Dean Garza, the Minecraft in Schools specialist, tells me that this is down to nostalgia. People just like the way they do things and are not willing to give that up because they're scared of it. They're scared of something new. Itzel said to me, she had never been into a virtual world before because she considered it a game. And this is the problem. Virtual worlds equals games. That's what a lot of people think. And so people who don't play games or don't have any interest in games, they're just going to think, I don't want to use a virtual world. It's just a game. so that's a big, it's a big stereotype that, people need to get over that idea as well. It's still managed to get over it, so, people can do, but this, there's a long way to go yet in persuading more people and getting more people to feel comfortable using virtual worlds. And that's something that Philip Rosedale tells me he's really trying to do, is get people comfortable in using these worlds. Because at the moment, the majority of people aren't. You put a headset on someone and people will say, I'm very not comfortable. But the beauty of Second Life, of course, is you don't need to wear a headset. But so despite more people knowing about these worlds, still there are not enough people who know about the benefits. There's a skills gap. People still are struggling to use technology to the best of their abilities. And Gaio, who was the one who helped Itzel build the campus, the Cardiff campus in Second Life, he says more virtual world specialists are needed. Now that was his role at the college in Cardiff, and he says if we have more of these jobs available and in schools and further education colleges, then more people, it will normalize it for people. So people will see them around, people will see what they're doing, and people will get used, even if they don't have the skills themselves, they will become more used to seeing it being used in their environments, by their colleagues. So that's what we need, according to Gaio. And of course, as Draxter said, access to technology and internet, it's not equal. And so that's something else that we need to overcome. And stereotypes still exist. I mean, I spoke to my sister about this presentation before today, and she said, the first two examples you given are about girls. I said, yeah, what about it? And she said, well, it shocked me. I thought you'd be talking about boys playing games. And so it just goes to show, my sister's younger than me, and so still has stereotypes. And yeah, no, she's not a gamer, as you can tell. So there is a long way to go, despite all that we've learned. And the question is now, will we learn? Will we learn from what's happened over the past 2-3 years now of the pandemic, or are we quick to forget? Are we quick to go back to our old ways now that face-to-face has resumed? Well, I was happy to hear that some of the people I've spoken to that I've mentioned today are still using virtual worlds for teaching. So I guess we'll see is the answer. We have to wait and see if we build on the knowledge that we learned over lockdown, or if we end up going back to our old ways, our nostalgic old ways. Anyway, so that is my presentation. I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. Please do get in touch with me. If you have anything, you can email me. If you'd like to read the book, then the quickest way for you to get hold of a copy is through my publisher, which is Renard Press. If you head on over to their website, they ship worldwide, and that is the quickest way. But it is sold online as well. But head on over to Renard Press website if you'd like. You can also read the snippet as well, snippet of the first chapter. Please get in touch with me on my socials as well. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you do read the book, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So please do get back in touch with me. But now I'm going to hand over to the floor. And does anybody have any thoughts that they'd like to add, or any questions for me?
That was so wonderful, Alex. Thank you so much. Perhaps you could put your contact information in the text chat. That'd be super for people. Then they can grab it. But you've definitely given us a lot to think about. And that's a question I have too. Will we learn? Indeed, we'll just have to wait and see. So there's a number of questions and comments that have been coming through. Oh, thanks so much. And I can attest to the book coming quickly. I'm in Canada. I ordered the book and I had it within a week, which is probably better than if I had ordered it from Toronto. So yahoo. They were really good, and they sent me a lovely note.
Oh, yeah, my publisher's lovely, really
They're
lovely.
Great. So if you have any more questions or comments, please put them in the chat with a Q. But meanwhile, we have a question that came through from Shaylee Garfield. And Shaylee asked, how did you find or come across the various case studies in your book?
Oh, that's a good question. A lot of research Twitter Spaces actually were, I found to be a good resource. I don't know if any of you use Twitter Spaces, but I was invested in them over lockdown. I was playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla on my PlayStation while listening to really interesting discussions on Twitter Spaces, and so I heard about a lot of people and a lot of stories there, and that's how I heard about Leyline, which is a non-profit organization set up by Jeremy Della Rosa, and so I got in touch with him and asked him about that, and so yeah, that's how I found him. How did I find? Oh yeah, I found Shyla and Gentle through Dragster, and I found Dragster through. I was just looking up. I think I was searching about how Animal Crossing had helped gamers through lockdown, and so I came across Dragster's film, Virtual Cultures in Pandemic Times, I think is the title of it. It was a fascinating, really, really, really interesting video, a film, and I would recommend you go and watch it. You can find it on YouTube, and if you Google it as well. That was just eye-opening. And another example I found through that is actually her name is Sharon Sue from America. She talks to me about how she suffered racism. Her parents are from China. She lives in Santa Monica, and she said to me something quite disturbing. She was like, at first, when I started leaving the house again, I would wear a baseball cap and a mask so that people couldn't see what I was. And I was just like, wow, that's just never, can't even imagine having to hide what you look like. Anyway, I'm going off on one here, but yes, I found a lot of people through online and talking to people and spaces and yeah, all sorts of sources, mainly online.
And speaking of Gentle, we do have a question from her. So here we are. Gentle asks, for people who aren't asking, is SL still around, but instead are asking, isn't SL a game? What is a good way to convince them otherwise? What should we be doing?
That's a good question.
Gentle always has good questions.
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm just going to reread that. Yeah, what's a good way to convince them? Well, when I had an interview, my interview with the people at Cardiff and Vale College International, they shared their screen and took me on a tour of Second Life, of the campus, and that to me was the moment where I was like, wow, okay, this is the future, this is it. And so people need to see it more. We need to see more examples of it. I mean, this conference, there's so much going on in this conference that a lot of people just aren't aware of. And if we just need to show it instead of asking people to, point to links and stuff, maybe take snippets of videos and actually post the videos of it. Book clubs, I mean, again, I've just had my eyes completely opened by the book clubs that can be held in these virtual worlds. And I didn't have a clue about this. There's so many benefits, but people just don't know about them. And I think it's quashing that virtual worlds are games idea. People need to get away from that because, yeah, Second Life is not a game, as Dragster tell me often. It's not a game, but people don't know it. And I think the same with other virtual worlds. I think over the pandemic, more people have seen that they're more than just a game or not games. I think more people have realized that. So I think the tides are slowly changing. Perhaps the pandemic has been the floodgates that needed to be opened, and now these gates are opened, hopefully, it's going to allow more people to see things differently. That's my hope, anyway.
And Agile Bill responded, well, what's wrong with games? Games are learning too. And Beth Ghost Raven says, yeah, Minecraft is not just a game either. So those are all things to think about, right?
Very true, very true.
We have a question from Pookie Amsterdam, and Pookie asks, there was a statement that Second Life would not be used by the college as a whole due to higher quality applications. And she wants to know what virtual platform or metaverse would the college be otherwise considering?
Yeah, that's that was a good question. I don't know is the answer to that. That was going to be my next question to them, but I was on a that they gave me that today actually. They that was an email that they responded to me today. So I didn't have time to get back to them and ask them what that would be, but I will be asking them what that will be. I've got another keynote speech coming up in July. Along the similar lines, not focusing so much on education, more gaming industry, but I will be including that in that discussion as well. So do follow me on my socials, get in touch with me, drop me an email actually, and once I know the answer, I will get back to you. I'll email you back and let you know.
Terrific. Yeah, Pookie is a documentary filmmaker here in virtual worlds and especially in Second Life. So do check her out on socials too. She's doing all sorts of amazing work.
Yeah, we should connect, definitely.
There you go. This is what happens. Particle physicist asks, to me, a metaverse is similar to a game, but with other purposes in gaming and like socializing and hosting events. Both can be built with common game development tools like Unity and Unreal, but they serve different purposes, and they're both made like MMORPGs. So I don't, not really a question in there, particle physicist, more of a comment, but that's a good one. I think it's a really good one.
Yeah, that is a good comment. In the book, I've asked a load of people for their views on the metaverse, because one thing that I found from writing the book was that if you bring up the word metaverse, it is literally like you just don't know what's going to happen. A bomb could drop. People would be like, "It's not metaverse, it's metaverses," and then someone else would be like, "Don't say metaverses if you don't want hate mail." And oh my goodness, there were just so many different opinions on it. So I've tried to cover as many in the book as I possibly can. But Philip Rosedale gives me his take on it. Tim Schafer from Double Fine Productions, a great game designer, he gives me his take on it, and loads of others as well. So yeah, if you're interested in a metaverse chat, then there's a full chapter on it in my book.
We had a number of comments from Day Miami, and Day said that schools in Virginia that rushed students back to school saw a drop in enrollment and a drop in their budgets. Schools that stayed at least in part virtual saw a rise in enrollment and their budgets. So there's a lesson there for administrators.
Yeah, that
is a good flexible.
Yeah, and actually just to add to that point, Wrexham, Glyndŵr University in Wrexham in North Wales, they have game design courses, and I was talking to the leader of the course, and he says to me, well, it's been a really tricky one for us, as course leaders, because you've got some people who don't want to come back to face-to-face. They actually really like they found it really easier for them to work online. They don't want to come back to face-to-face. They're finding it hard. Whereas you've got people who do want to come back and don't want to be doing an online course. So they saw a drop in the numbers of people joining their courses because over the lockdown, because kids didn't want to do it if it was online. So there's, there are two different opinions, and it's hard for education people to really try and battle that and overcome that. How do you cater for everybody? Well, a hybrid model is obviously the most attractive in that respect, just as that comment highlighted.
Yeah, they also commented that he was speaking to a teacher in Sweden who told him that pre-COVID, Sweden had already given out the internet to all families and computers and iPads to all students. And teachers and students were trained how to use the technology. I think that might be the key. And so when they had to do any sort of the at-home learning pieces, Sweden had no problem. They were good to go. So
that's really good. I'm going to make a note of that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's 1 minute to the time to close. Oh, particle physicist says, yes, I'm from Sweden. I can confirm we did this. Excellent, excellent.
Oh, cool.
And Pookie says they just need the right incentive, and it should appeal to their self-interest. So my Ben Franklin management book told me anyhow. Love Pookie. Thanks, Pookie. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Alex. You've given us a lot to think about. And for many of us, confirmed what we already believed and have given us ways to think about things moving forward in the future. Um, it's been wonderful, and I'm definitely going to stay friends with you on the socials the whole time.
Oh yes, please do. Yes, please. And also, if you have anyone else has any thoughts after this, do get in touch. I'd love to hear them. Um, yeah, everyone. It's just been great. A great experience. Just I absolutely loved writing the book. It was an amazing experience. It was stressful towards the end, but actual writing it and speaking to people was just
Woohoo.
fantastic. So
Yeah.
please keep in touch with me with any
And
thoughts.
hey, give a shout out to your mom for designing the cover too. That was great.
Oh, yes, I will. Yeah, she was great. Yeah, I will let her know. Thank you.
A
Thank you all
nice
for
follow
coming.
up. A nice follow up from Alex talk today will be our quadrivium topic. That's going to be along shortly, and we're going to be talking about the lessons learned and if educators have actually taken them to heart. So, what are the lessons learned coming from pandemic education practices? So, it's going to be a good one. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you, everybody.
Let's see that big old VWBPE applause.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Oh, this is so cool. Thank
Isn't it the
you.
best?
It is. It's great. I love it. It beats real life, physical world conferences for
Yes,
sure.
indeed,
You don't get the
indeed.
same nerves. Thank you,
Oh, and
everybody.
Serena says, please to remember to drop over to the social sim for our next social event. It's going to be great.
Oh, sounds great. Thank
We
you.
have we have lots of parties.
Oh, when is it?
When are we having our next event, Serena? What time is it?
Oh, it's right now.
Now. Okay. Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
All
How do
right.
I get there? Anyway, I
Thank
will look
you.
for that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again.